Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads. We are going to finally be doing our Star Wars character tier list. If you have been following our channel for a long time, this is a kind of a redux of one that I did. It was one of our first videos ever that I did back in 2021. It was 150 plus Star Wars characters, and since I've added even more. So we're going to be doing this. Hopefully, it'll probably be a long video. So get some popcorn, get ready to watch this go down. And this time, I have Sonic joining me to give his opinions as we jointly rank all of these iconic Star Wars characters. And that's what it will be. It'll be the most iconic of the Star Wars characters. So, not too many side characters, a hodgepodge here and there of random famous side characters, but for the most part, it is the main characters of the series across Star Wars canon and legends, and we will be taking both into account. Before we do so, make sure you hit that like button. It really helps us out with the channel. Help us get to 50 likes on this video. That would be a great target number. Subscribe to our channel for more Star Wars content like this. We do a tier list every single month. Comment below, let us know your thoughts. Obviously, you're going to probably disagree with some places we put some, and you're going to agree with others. Make sure you let us know your opinion down below. We're going to kick it off here. I believe a lot of them are in alphabetical order. So we're going to start it here with Aayla Secura, not one of the top tier characters, I would say. An interesting Jedi, a Jedi who has been explored a bit more outside of the films, because if we were just sticking to the film, she's not anywhere near the top tier. I would say she's probably a C tier character.
I think C tier is good. I think she had the potential to be like a B tier for me if she had more in 2008 Clone Wars. If it was closer to Star Wars Republic, I think she would have been up there.
Star Wars Republic does do a good job with her. I forgot about that. Maybe B.
I'll put her lower B. Next up, we have Ahsoka Tano. I think she's a great character. I want to say she's just S. She's not S plus to me. I feel like there's just some contrived storytelling at times.
Yeah, to me, the way we used to do S tier back in the day, where we would only do like 5 in S tier, I'm kind of treating S plus like that. Not that it has to be like only 5, but I feel like S plus should be the absolute most sacred, hallowed ground of Star Wars characters. And I think Ahsoka is just outside of that. Next, we have Amilyn Holdo from Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. No matter where we put this character, nobody will be happy. To be honest, not a huge fan of this character. I like the scene. I like the Holdo maneuver. A lot of people hate that. Her plan, though, incredibly contrived. I don't like that she didn't tell Poe, this guy is so volatile, just tell him. And some of her other material as well, she's a completely different character in Leia and Princess of Alderaan before they changed her up. And therefore, we have kind of quite contrasting versions of her across canon. The comics version has been all right, but I think she's D amongst the rest of these characters that are here.
Yeah, she's a little tough for me because I think most of my experiences recently have been with the Star Wars 2020 line where she's had a bit more of a significant role. And I think she's pretty good there. I really do struggle with some of her more stronger choices in The Last Jedi. I would honestly say bottom of C. I think she's gotten some great development in the comics, but I wouldn't mind top of D either. Next up, we have the Chosen One himself, Anakin. He's what the whole story is about. It's an easy S plus for me.
Completely agree. S plus. This is Anakin and Vader as one entry. Even Legends and canon, I feel like Anakin is very nicely bookended on both sides. Where in Legends we explore a lot more of his early life, post Phantom Menace, but before Attack of the Clones. In canon, we've explored a lot of his time as Darth Vader. Next, we have Asajj Ventress. Asajj Ventress is a pretty awesome character when you include both timelines. A character that has a lot more tragedy in canon, but in Legends has the cool factor. So combining them, I think she's a pretty awesome character. I would put her in A tier.
I would also put her in A tier after Dark Disciple. I thought she had a really great end there. Next up, we have Aurra Sing, kind of a mother figure to Boba, but probably the worst mom you could have around. The moments that she had in the Clone Wars were pretty solid. I would say like C. I think there's just a lot of unrealized potential for her.
When you include Republic, I gotta go at least B for Aurra Sing.
Okay, that's fair.
Next, we have the Droid Smith. Babu Frik. I feel like, honestly, maybe the most universally liked thing in The Rise of Skywalker. A side character, a fun gimmick. I think the lowest he can go is C.
For now, top of C, but I wouldn't mind moving him up to bottom of B. Next up, we have Grogu, more commonly known as Baby Yoda to this day. He's a fun character, but he has been treated more of like a plot convenience, plot device than anything else. And it is a little frustrating with how he was a bit underused in Mando season 3. I would give it like a B. You know, I think he's really cute, but he's still not quite the Mandalorian slash Jedi that we expect him to be.
My instinct was initially A because of how iconic he is, but he really isn't much of a character yet. Serves his role incredibly adequately. I mean, in every way, right? He is iconic. He's meant to be the cute factor. He's meant to have these great moments. You can't knock him for that, but at the same time, yeah, I don't feel like Grogu is the reason I personally watch the show. I know he is for a lot of people, but I would say top of B. Next, we have Barriss Offee. Barriss Offee has very conflicting storylines throughout canon and Legends, and the fact is that the storyline from the Clone Wars is in Legends also. So there's a lot of contradiction there with her character. However, all her story is really strong, somewhere at the top of B, but I'd be pretty happy with an A minus as well.
I think I'll go top of B. Also, just never have really loved how she, out of the blue, became the person to betray Ahsoka. I feel like there's a story that needs to be told there. I feel like she needs to have story after her imprisonment as well. Next up, we have Baze Malbus. He's the brawn. He's got some really cool moments with his gun, but obviously that final scene with him. Bottom of B.
I would too. I think that last scene is what gets him up there. Next is BB-8, who is our main droid, obviously, in the sequel trilogy. BB-8 is a cool design. I still like the design. That being said, never leaves the mark that R2 or 3PO left originally. I mean, it was going to be hard to live up to that name, but other droid characters have come and I think taken that baton and ran with it. BB-8 was always kind of hampered by the fact that R2 and 3PO were still part of the story. I would say BB-8 is also a B.
Yeah, I'd put him at bottom of B. I think it's important to note that of the droids that we've seen in canon and legends, he's the one who's like arguably the closest to like a kid. The more emotional moments where, you know, he sees like Poe get captured and all that are really strong still. Next we had Bib Fortuna. I think he's a lot more interesting in legends than he is in canon so far. Firmly B for me. I don't think he's anything like stupendous.
Yeah, I like that B placement, probably towards the bottom as well. I just want to know what his 5 years were like in charge of Jabba's palace as
Yeah.
baby daimyo. Well, we move from Bib Fortuna to Boba Fett. And Boba Fett, including both canon and legends, has to rank here very highly. I'm a big fan of a lot of what they did with Boba Fett in Legends. Also, some great stuff with him in canon in the comic books. Not as many great moments in the book of Boba Fett. There's work to be done with Boba, and I think as we continue to flesh him out in canon, there will be even more to add to his like top tier candidacy. As of now, I have to put him behind Ahsoka in that S legendary standard S tier.
I would actually put him in S minus. I think as much as I really do enjoy him, I think I still really enjoy his Legends version more. That being said, his highs are high in both canon and Legends. Like the War of the Bounty Hunters with him really shows off just how awesome he can be in canon. He's great in the Clone Wars. I would push for S minus, but I wouldn't mind being behind Ahsoka in S.
I'd be okay with S minus on the stipulation that the Book of Boba Fett like subtracted some of his S
Yes.
status.
Next up, we have Bodhi Rook. Bodhi Rook, played by one of my favorite actors, one of the most underrated of our generation, Riz Ahmed. He is definitely one I feel gets a little undercut by some of the reshoots, some of the editing. He definitely does come on strong in the second half. I would put him around the same place as Baze. I put him bottom of B.
I was gonna say D tier. I think Bodhi is the weakest by far, in my opinion, of the Rogue One crew. His arc is fine, but in general, after the Borg Gullet, he's just this kind of odd man out. His story doesn't really go down one of the two paths, and I feel like the movie treats him like that. He's basically a plot device to get information to get for characters, and then he also helps send the signal up. So if we compromise, it would be a C for Bodhi. Next is the awesome boss Nass, who deserves more screen time. So I'll say C for boss Nass.
Yeah, I'll also say C. Next up, we have Bossk. I really like him. It is a little hard to write for what is essentially just a cold-blooded lizard with no heart. But I think Canon and Legends both have done really good jobs with that. Maybe top of B, mid B, somewhere around there.
I would say the same. B, I was going to say behind Ayla. Next, we have C3PO. C3PO is my favorite droid of all time. I love the way Anthony Daniels plays him. I love his nervousness. I love his sense of humor, his quips, his sarcasm. I would say he's S. I don't know if I could rank him higher than Ahsoka.
Yeah, I would also put him in S. He is a bit of a showstopper in The Rise of Skywalker. All right, next we have Cad Bane. I would put him as an A character for sure.
I was gonna fight for Cad Bane at S minus. He's my favorite bounty hunter. He doesn't have the character as some other people that might be up in that top tier, but as a bounty hunter, as a ruthless character, as someone who fills a role that he is given, I think Cad Bane is like the top of the top. So my vote would be for S minus.
Sure, I can bump it up.
Next, we have Phasma. Captain Phasma, easily one of the most disappointing characters of the sequel trilogy. The only thing that slightly redeems Phasma is her book and her comic book. Phasma is a good book. However, Phasma is also not written from her perspective. I don't know if it's good enough to bump her up into anything above C for me.
Yeah, I agree about C. I haven't read her novel yet, but I thought the comic that she has is really good. Next up, we got Captain Rex. He's awesome. He is everyone's most famous clone. I would put him as S, legendary. I don't know if I can put him higher though.
I agree. S. If Ahsoka's our barometer for the top of S, not too many people will be getting through. But Rex is the best clone out there, has the most development, has the longest story, and is the one most likely we are going to continue to explore. Next, we have Cara Dune. Cara Dune is a pretty interesting character in The Mandalorian. I don't find her to have much depth, but as a stand in for a former rebel shock trooper, a cool badass character, I do like Kara's appearances. That would probably make her drop to somewhere at the bottom of B or top of C for me. I would say bottom of B.
I think she's a lot stronger in season one for me than she is in season two. Yeah, but I wish we could have seen a little bit more of like the complexity behind her character that's always hinted at, but it's not really there. So yeah, bottom of B I think is fine. Next up we have Cassian Andor, who until 2 years ago, or a little over 2 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, maybe like a C tier character, but after Andor, he is definitely shot up. I would say he is an A tier. I'm still waiting on a little bit more from him.
I was going to say S minus for Andor. Cassian was a character that I think you're a little too harsh on him for Rogue One. I would have said easy B, maybe A, because I think he has the best arc in the movie. That being said, I think Andor, the show, bumps Cassian up so high that like I think by the end of the entire show, we could be looking at possibly like a fringe standard S tier character.
I don't mind bumping him up to S minus. I just think there's a couple more candidates that I'm more sure about right now.
Next up, we have one of my favorite villains of all time, Emperor Sheev, Palpatine. Oh man, I love this guy so much. Palpatine is awesome, and I think he serves his role. I've talked a lot about that for this tier list. I think it's hard to judge characters because there are obviously leads, and then there are co-leads, and then there are side characters and villains, and you have to serve your role adequately. Palpatine serves his role extremely adequately. He is as good of a villain as you can get in terms of just pure evilness. He doesn't have the depth that other villains have, and as much as it pains me to say, might keep him out of S plus for me. Although I would like to argue for S plus, but I think I'm okay with S. But I do love everything about him, and then obviously including Legends stuff. Darth Plagueis, I think, gives him an incredible origin story and a really fascinating one. I love Palpatine. I'll say S plus, but I'm cool with S.
Yeah, I'll go with S for him. I think, yes, he hams it up. Ian is incredible in the role. But if there is a story told connecting post Return of the Jedi and what he's forced to go through, what he's forced to develop into before eventually reverting into the madman that he is. I think that would make him really fascinating. He's just missing a little bit of an arc for me there because his prequel arc is very solid, but he's also in a place of a lot of security at that point. So, yeah, top of S for sure. All right, next up we have Chewbacca. Oh, Chewbacca's a tough one to grade because he's awesome, right? His dynamic with Han is amazing. I don't know, it's hard to judge him because he doesn't really have true dialogue in the same way as other characters do. He does exactly what he needs to really well.
I've been trying to think about this too, and I wanted to see where you put him. My initial instinct was S minus because he's so iconic. Again, filling roles. He's the sidekick. He does a great job of that. But you know, some of the worst stuff in Star Wars has to apply to Chewbacca. The holiday special is all about him. It's one of the few stories that's all about him. Also, in Legends doesn't do him much of a service considering he spoilers dies. But yeah, I think I don't know. It's a tough toss up with Chewbacca. Like, is he a better character than Cassian and Ventress? No. Does he serve his role just as well? I think so. It does hurt a little bit, but we have to be tough with this type of list. Next up, we have Chirrut Imwe. Chirrut Imwe, another standout character from Rogue One. One that doesn't really go through much of an arc, although I would say has some of the best moments. Donnie Yen does a great job playing him. Obviously, his death is one of the most emotional in the film, but I think he can't go much higher than B as well.
Yeah, he's the one who's the most assured of who he is. He's along with the journey because it's the will of the Force. But if we're gonna put him somewhere, I don't know. He's like around Bossk level for me. Next up, we have Chopper, Harrison Dua's maniacal, homicidal terrorist droid. It's nice having a droid that is just so much of a personality that even at times R2 feels like he is a bit subservient to the plot and the other major characters. Chopper refuses to. He'll take over a scene, and I've always appreciated that about his character. I honestly say he's an A tier character.
I would too. I would say he's bottom of A right now, but he's a great droid. And I think talking about BB-8 earlier, BB-8 feels sometimes like a bit more cutesy R2 versus Chopper is like grungy R2. Like he has really nothing in common with any droid. He has his own personality, is completely unique. And that's pretty hard to do with droids, especially with main character droids. Next, we have one of my favorite clones, Clone Commander Cody. Cody has an interesting story in both canon and Legends, and I look forward to seeing more of it continue to flesh out here in canon because I think it's being taken in a bit more interesting direction than it was originally in Legends. When we're looking at this tier list, ranking him, I would put him in mid B.
Iconic as his look is, for as important as he is to the events of the Star Wars story, he is very monotonous. Great episode in the Bad Batch. I hope he returns. I hope it's leading us to pushing him up one day up to an A. And yeah, right now he's definitely a B. Next up, we have Count Dooku. This guy, especially in canon, has had a lot of love. I love everything about his story. I love that he's not necessarily like dark side for the worst reasons, but he is, and he fully embraces his own fall. From what we have right now, I wouldn't mind arguing an S minus.
You don't even have to argue. I'll put him at the top of S minus, or maybe right behind Boba Fett, around that level.
Yeah.
Canon has done an amazing job humanizing Count Dooku. Next, we have Maul, or Darth Maul. Maul has become one of the seminal characters of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, one of the most tragic villains in the entirety of Star Wars, a real Shakespearean type character, and I really appreciate what has been done with Maul. Someone who obviously was just created to look cool and menacing has turned into one of the elite Star Wars characters, and dare I say, a legendary Star Wars character. I would say he belongs in S tier.
I would agree. And he still has the potential to be an S plus. That's how good his story has been in canon. But we still haven't seen his Crimson Dawn era yet. Next up, we have Aurra Krennic. Man, I have a lot of mixed feelings about this guy, but I feel like he is still a little shortchanged in Star Wars history with how Tarkin kind of treats him and just the portrayal and the time that he gets in Rogue One. I would say he's a B tier.
I would say B as well. I think upper B. Well, let's move on to DJ from The Last Jedi. I'm not a Last Jedi hater. I don't want people to think that, by me saying that I think DJ's F tier. Even before all the criticism of The Last Jedi came out from every corner of the internet, I felt a little cheated with the wasting of Benicio del Toro. I know leading up to the movie, a lot of us were theorizing, could he be some type of dark side character or Sith? What could be his role? It's so secret. They're not talking about him at all. DJ, a lot of people thought it meant Dark Jedi. And then he was just a guy to help Finn learn a lesson about good people and bad people on both sides of the war. Not a big fan of DJ. I would say F.
Unfortunately, also F. I don't mind the portrayal. I just think it's so heavy-handed and also just so short. Next up, we have Dryden Voss. What we got from Dryden Voss, what we got from Paul Bettany's performance of it is pretty good. It's just nothing special. Top of C, bottom of B.
I would say C tier as well. Having read the Crimson Climb book, I think that book does a decent job of making him more intimidating. You get to see a lot more people's perspectives, a lot more brutality out of him, but he's still pretty much a one-note character. Next, we have Echo, member of the Bad Batch, before that member of the 501st ARC Trooper, had a really interesting journey throughout the entirety of the Clone Wars into the Bad Batch. Unfortunately, though, Echo's always been like second fiddle to somebody, whether he was second fiddle to Five, second fiddle to Heavy, second fiddle to the rest of the Bad Batch now, second fiddle to Rex. I feel like for how tragic Echo's character is, we should be ranking him higher. As of now, though, I think I got to put him in B tier.
Yeah, it's a shame because I thought with how season 7 really brings him back, with the story that he had with Fives, with Domino Squad, I thought he was set up to be massive. So yeah, I'd say B. Next up, we have Embo. I mean, rule of cool applies to a lot of characters, but him especially. He's so cool. I would put him somewhere in B.
I would too. Definitely outside of Cad Bane, my favorite standout new bounty hunter that's been introduced in the Clone Wars or animation eras of Star Wars. Next, we have Enfys Nest. Enfys Nest, interesting character. I think Enfys Nest, the idea of Enfys Nest is very cool. The twists, I felt like this character and that storyline was kind of unnecessary. I would say C tier for me.
Yeah, I think C tier is pretty solid. I don't know if she's a character that would fit something like an Andor, but I would love if she could because I think she's a very young character who's driven by such strong morals. All right, next up we have Evan Peel. He kind of feels like a Yoda fill-in, like a substitute teacher Yoda at times. Maybe like bottom of B, top of C.
I agree, and I don't know where to put him because I think the Citadel arc is a very standout series. I mean, obviously, it's more for Ahsoka's growth and Echo's death, but he does do a strong job. Stories and Legends are good. Yeah, I mean, I want to say B because I feel like putting him in C is a little more disrespectful. Next, we have Ezra Bridger. Ezra Bridger's story is obviously kind of just beginning as we get him in live action now, and we're set to have some major future for this character. But so far, one season through Ahsoka and 4 seasons through Star Wars Rebels, I can safely say Ezra Bridger is one of the better characters in Star Wars. Now, ranking him is tough because does he quite cross over into that all-time tier of Star Wars characters up in the S's? I think he does, but in the S- tier. I would put him in S-.
Yeah, Ezra Bridger, man, he connects the eras of the prequels. He connects it to the original trilogy quite well. Started off a little annoying, but has all the lessons of early Ahsoka. He quickly matured into a very solid, if not great at times, character. I would say top of A, somewhere around there, but I can see S minus. I don't know if I'm underselling him or if I'm not overselling him, honestly.
And that's where the conversation about the rest of these characters needs to happen because I think he's, not as iconic as Cad Bane, but probably a better character. Cassian, we have more story for Ezra than Cassian, although Cassian's is a bit more elevated, a bit more adult. Same with Ventress's is a little bit more tragic. I'm cool with them either way. He's fringe S minus for me, but I think he is a strong character, and in my opinion, the second best of Rebels after Kanan.
Yeah, I can go bottom of S minus. I think that's fair. Next up, we have Finn, FN2187, as he once used to be known. I really like John Boyega, man, and I thought he was great in The Force Awakens. The Last Jedi, even though I've been like understanding of his story there, it isn't really good for him. It is a little repetitive to what he's already faced. And I honestly don't think he's that bad in The Rise of Skywalker, even if he does get meme for it a lot, because I think he's still advancing in his, sentiment and rising up. But that's the thing, right? All his greatest moments feel undercut, and you don't market a guy like that to be a Jedi, especially someone as charismatic as John Boyega. Like, I'm gonna say bottom of B. I think The Force Awakens, it's just that good of a performance that what comes after is a disappointment.
I usually go a lot easier on Finn because I like John Boyega and because I think this character has so much potential. That being said, I still have to definitely say C. But Finn is relatively inoffensive across his three movies. He's kind of stagnant in the first two, learns pretty similar lessons across both. And then in the third one, makes a big jump, but a lot of it's off screen and we don't get to see too much of who he is. Finn deserved a lot more, a lot better. I feel like we got to put him C just because he deserves better. But yeah, man, Finn is so disappointing. We can move on to a great character and one that has definitely gotten far more use than you would have expected when we first met him. Fives. Fives is one of the elite clone troopers, one of the great clone troopers of all time, and one of the more tragic characters in Star Wars. Fives has a significance now that is really beyond anything we could have imagined when we first met him in Rookies. And I gotta say, I think Fives belongs in that upper echelon of Star Wars characters. I would say Fives is an S minus.
If I had my way, he's at the top of the list of every list because I love the character to death. And it is tragic that we lose him because he is your favorite clone's favorite clone. So I would push for a bottom of S. I'd like to say that him and Rex are on the same level. It's just that Rex clearly been around longer. But Rex doesn't become who he is without Fives. I think it's important to let him carry that out. So I would say bottom of S.
Since he is one of your favorite characters, I'm happy to grant that at the bottom of S. It is a little painful putting him above Boba Fett.
Next we have Garazeb Aurelius. He's great in Rebels. He is definitely a character that gets most of his evolution done in the first two seasons. I would say B.
I would say B as well. But I think when we look at him amongst the other breadth of Star Wars characters, especially amongst characters who do get a significant amount of screen time, he leaves a lesser impact than a lot of other ones. Next, we have General Grievous. General Grievous, who frankly would be getting a very low grade from me if this was not including Star Wars Legends. Since it is including Star Wars Legends and subsequently his awesome backstory, his amazing sequences in Clone Wars 03, he bumps up very high for me. For me, I want to say A minus tier because of how much of an impact this character left on me in Clone Wars 03.
He's been effective at his job. He just happens to go up against all-time characters and look really bad in comparison. I think sometimes we fault him a little bit too much for that. I would say top of B, but I'm okay with an A minus.
Like, because that stuff is genuinely like S minus level in Clone Wars 03, but then he gets beat by the Gungans. That one's always never sat well with him. He can take out the entire coven of Night Sisters. He can take out Kit Fisto and Nadar Bev and have this amazing trap. Then he gets beat by the Gungans. This is why.
Next up, we have General Hux, Armitage Hux. Fascinating character with a great actor as well. But like a lot of the sequels, if you're not well serviced by The Last Jedi, you don't get a lot of service in The Rise of Skywalker. In a lot of ways, I do like his overall arc. I don't know. And he's not terrible in The Last Jedi either. It's just, I think it's just too much of a leap in The Rise of Skywalker that brings him down for me. Somewhere in C, I'm like a low C.
F. I don't know. Hux is awful in my opinion. He's fine in Force Awakens, but then he becomes a joke in The Last Jedi, becomes an even bigger joke in The Rise of Skywalker, and his role as the spy is basically just played off for a joke, and then he's immediately shot. In my opinion, F. So if we want to split the middle, we can go with D. General Pride is pretty cool and actually relatively competent. I would have liked to see this character the entire time, but he's basically a nothing character at this point. I think decent enough to put in C.
Yeah, I think he has all the right building blocks. Yeah, I think top of C. I think he's up there with Finn. Next up, we have Grand Admiral Thrawn. Legendary character, legendary. And he's so good in Legends, but I think he's become something really unique and special in canon. I would say he is a potential candidate for S plus, if not S for sure.
Yeah, I think S for sure. The books, especially the canon books, make me want to put him S plus. He's a really well established character. I mean, he's not just a villain anymore. He's a great, well-rounded character. Something Zahn started when writing in Legends and is completely fleshed out in canon. I think I would have to leave him in S right now because I think Ahsoka is going to be the character-defining thing for him. It's like, how do we make it out of Ahsoka? And the Dave Filoni movie with Thrawn will determine whether he's S+. I think he's got enough material in canon books and Legends books mixed with Rebels and season 1 of Ahsoka to put him up there. But as of now, I think we got to wait to see how that finale happens. And he does need a seminal villain story in canon. Next, we have Grand Moff Tarkin. Grand Moff Wilf Tarkin is a really great character and has especially in canon been given a lot more backstory. But with that character development, he's very similar to Dooku in my opinion. I don't think he's ever as sympathetic as Dooku has been in the past or as tragic, but they're on that similar level of like always been icons, both older guys as well, but always been icons, and now have been given enough story to where they're like creeping on that S legendary tier. I think I still have to put Tarkin in S minus.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he was always, by the nature of him dying in the original Star Wars film, going to be limited on what we knew. And it's not really a lot that you could just be like, oh, I'm going to trace out his whole backstory and understand different eras. No, he was always going to be his legacy. Great character. I would say S minus A. Next up, we have McClunky. I'm sorry. Greedo. He's kind of just a bumbling idiot that has great reflexes. That's really all he is. He does his job well, but I don't think it's a lot. So I would say like a top of C.
Yeah, I was going to suggest B, like a Bib Fortuna level, in the sense that, yeah, Bib Fortuna has more character, more spots to grow. Greedo is pretty simple. He's a simpleton, and I'm in that vein, I'm completely happy with top of C. But he does serve his scene perfectly well. Next, we have Greef Karga. Rest in peace, Carl Weathers. A really solid character, and I think more of a standout than Cara Dune, in my opinion. Mostly just because he's a funny character. He's fun. He's memorable in the sense that he's very fun and he's recurring. And I'm gonna miss him saying, "Hey, Mando." Very middle of the pack B.
I mean, he's great in season 1, right? Going from the villain that we first meet to, great ally of Mando. I loved his season 3 look with the little droids falling after him and holding his cape up. That is very prequel-esque. I don't know. He's like a B, just a firm B. I think he did as well as he could. And next up, we got Han Solo, man. But I think what's always been really important about his character is his heart. Like he's always put his heart in the right place. I love all the expanded edition material in both EU and in canon. I think he's been serviced really well across his time. Yeah, I would say he is an S tier.
I'd say S plus for Han Solo. I feel like he's one of the big three. He has great story. Legends in particular does a better job with him, considering when we go with him for another 40 years after Return of the Jedi. He's involved in every major conflict. We have a true strong origin story for him there. But canon's done an admirable job too. All of Harrison Ford's performances post Return of the Jedi have all been great and a lot better than you would expect. Han's always been one of the most iconic characters in fiction. If we're not giving Han Solo an S+, we're going to have very, very few people in S+.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Next, we have Hera Syndulla. Hera Syndulla, definitely a character when I first watched Rebels that I thought, okay, she doesn't have the moments like Ezra and Kanan and even Sabine, but on my rewatches of Rebels, Hera is somebody I've fallen in love with more and more over the years. And now with the surprisingly great performance and version of Hera that we get from Mary Elizabeth Winstead in Ahsoka, I think this character is primed to be one of the elite Star Wars characters of all time. I don't know if I could quite put her in S- yet, on a great trajectory. I'd put her above Chopper, though, and right around that Chewbacca level in A.
I think that's a perfect spot for her. I agree. I always liked her on my first watch, but rewatching episodes, she really does come off stronger. I think she's a character where her subtlety would have been a little bit better in like a TV 14 series or a PG series versus TVY7, right? She's going to be like the standard for how you write Twilight females who have been consistently misused and underserved throughout Star Wars history. Hondo Ohnaka, man, like, uh, he's an S tier. I'd say S minus more accurately because I think there still isn't a lot of story for him outside of the Clone Wars and Rebels, and he's the type of guy that I need to know what he was doing in between those eras. I would put him as an S minus right now. I think he perfectly understands his role.
Yeah, I feel like I'm usually the one fighting for Hondo in these tier lists, but I'm going to say A for Hondo. I don't know if I can put him above Cassian and Ventress in particular. But he is in that elite tier of Clone Wars characters, someone who became so iconic, transitioned into so many eras of Star Wars, and is going to be immortalized forever in the Disney parks and Smuggler's Run and that ride. And I would say A around the Chewbacca level as well.
Yeah, I don't mind. I think that's a good spot.
Next, we have IG-11. I really like IG-11's appearances. I enjoy Taika Waititi's voiceover. A strong, good appearance of this character, but I would say that is the extent of him. He's a good character, belongs in B tier.
I think if we left IG-11 dead, I would have been willing to bump him up as like a perfect example of a character who's not for long in the Star Wars universe, but is so impactful. I don't know. Yeah, I'd say somewhere around B. Next up, we got Jabba the Hutt. He's a guy who's more visually iconic than he is storytelling, but I don't know if I care too much about him as a character per se. I think there have been other Hutts and other media that I've found just as fascinating, if not more. I would say B. I think he's still really effective in the scenes that he gets.
Yeah, I want to say A for the iconicness of Jabba and the fact that he is a flawless version of what he does. But yeah, I don't know if I can say he's much better than Grievous or Grogu. He would be at the bottom of A anyways, so I'd say around that top of B in that upper echelon of in B in like the elite. Next we have Jango Fett, who definitely, including Legends, is going to be ranking a lot higher than he would have if he just included canon, where he's basically gotten no exploration outside of the film. Seeing Jango in action, take on Mace Windu, take on Obi-Wan, you get to see a lot more variety from him and his action. I'd put him in the A tier.
I agree with A tier. I think he's still super underrated to me. I think even with the development of Legends, he felt underrated. And canon, he's obviously underrated. Next up, we have Janna, another First Order ex-Stormtrooper that Finn runs into, but she's inoffensive. There's nothing inherently wrong with her. It's just not enough time to really explore her. I would give her like somewhere in C. I think she's a little bit more upper hand though, because I think she's going to be one that can be developed pretty well.
Yeah, I'd agree. Very, very much so. Like a cool idea. Again, most of the stuff with Finn, like the idea of Stormtrooper Rebellion, a lot of it cut and shrunk down into what we get here. I would say C. Next, we have, of course, a character we know exactly where he's going. He's going in the S+. I think we should just go ahead and just change it to Jar Jar and S+.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe J+. It's Jar Jar. In fact, what is he doing behind Anakin? Jar Jar is the greatest character in the history of Star Wars. I don't know what else to say if you disagree. This is our tier list, and he, of course, is number 1. I really don't know where to put Jar Jar, honestly.
He's a tough one. He is a tough one. I hope none of you fell for that act, but he is a tough one to gauge because I don't know. Let's go with what you're going to say here, Liam. What do you really think about Jar Jar?
I don't know. Like, I feel like he gets way more hate than he deserves. Obviously, we're prequel kids, so we like Jar Jar. Growing up, Jar Jar was funny. I still enjoy some of his goofy humor. I can understand the hate. I can understand all of that, but I can't retroactively say like, oh, now I hate Jar Jar because I'm an adult. No, like he worked for what he was going for. He's literally based on Goofy from the Disney cartoons. Like that's what he's supposed to be, and he works. I'd say B. Like I feel like he's got character to him. He's got some heart to him. Might as well at least give him B. He's good. I don't think there's anything bad about Jar Jar, but I can understand the dislike for him from the older generations. But for me, I've always liked Jar Jar. I think B.
Yeah, I think if we're gonna make Grievous the flag bearer of the top of B, I think maybe he's a good flag bearer for the bottom of B. You know, I think looking at him, I do think he's fine in the Phantom Menace. I wish there was a little bit more like maturity and development out of Jar Jar, a little bit more, like maybe even in his voice too, right? So if he had a little bit more development and still kept some of his goofier stuff, I think he could have actually been a great character. Next up, we have Jyn Erso. I mean, there's a lot of female characters in Star Wars these days that I think are really well developed. She fills her role well in the second half. She's got a really, really rough first half, if not 2/3 of the film. I don't know. I would honestly say top of C. I think she's really effective at the end, but I don't know if no, not C. I'll say B.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I was gonna say B as well, but she could be a lot better. I have not read Rebel Rising, which I've heard a lot of people say that's a really solid book and it handles her really well. Bodhi is the only character that I think I would say she's significantly better than. Other than that, the rest of them all at least have more interesting scenes. Granted, her death and her sacrifice and everything, I think is really strong. And for the fact that she just has more character, I'd like to put her ahead of Baze and Chirrut. Next up, we have K2SO, who's by far my favorite character from Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. You know, not discounting that Cassian has since gotten more character development. K2 was the big standout. K2's death, I thought, was the saddest out of all the crew. K2 has the most outstanding moments, both in action as well as with comedy. I don't know if he's quite good enough to put up an A because he is only one movie and done. I think Andor season 2 will give us more awesome K2 moments.
I was gonna say bottom of A. I think he's really good. It's a really tragic death, and I think he says climb as well, right? Which after seeing season 1, that's gotta really hit Cassian in his feels. Next up, we have Kanan Jarrus. Excellent, excellent character. I really do love him. You know, I think it's a little sad how a little bit of his origin has been a little shortchanged by the changes in the Bad Batch, but everything else I think has been really good. So I would not be opposed to putting him an S minus, but I can definitely see an argument for top of A.
I would absolutely put him an S minus. To me, he's by far the best character from Rebels. Learning to become a self-taught Jedi Knight all the way to growing into a really admirable hero and symbol of the rebellion. Next up, we have Ki-Adi-Mundi. I've always loved the design of Ki-Adi-Mundi. I enjoy his lines, his droid attacking the Wookiees line, his moments, especially when you're including Legends, a big part of the Republic comic books as well. Had some great early Phantom Menace era, or slightly post Phantom Menace era stuff, some good appearances in the Clone Wars. That being said, nothing to really raise him outside of that B tier, in my opinion.
This is a tough one because I'm a bit of a Ki-Adi-Mundi hater. I think he is one of the examples of everything wrong with the prequel Jedi. He's got a pretty decent start in the Second Battle of Geonosis, right? And I think that humanizes him a little bit. But I don't know. He's like a B to me. I don't really care too much about him. Next up, we have Kit Fisto, and oh man, I really like this guy. Right, Lair Grievous is great for him. He's got some awesome stuff in Legends, like we've seen in '03 Clone Wars. Totally badass of a character. But in canon and Legends, he's got like the worst death in the scene against Sidious. Right? It's but he's got a great face, really smiling all the time. He's like a low B for me. I just wish there's richer stories for him at some point.
Yeah, I agree. He's not given the luxury of having too much EU material like Ayla or Ki-Adi-Mundi. What he does have is good, and he will always have an iconic moment for his shirtless swimming scene. However, the beginning of Clone Wars '08 gave him time, and then they kind of just phased off of him and never really used him again. So I'm okay with the more bottom of B than Ayla and Ki-Adi-Mundi. Next, we have Queel. Queel, again, a one and done season character, but a character who's very effective in their one season. I really like what Queel does in the season, the lessons he imparts on Mando, and also just his words of wisdom, his I have spoken. It's just a fun character, a perfect Western character for the tone of The Mandalorian. Again, though, it's a B tier character. I don't think Queel gets to that A level at all.
Quill was such a great part at the start of this Mandoverse or this live action Star Wars television. And he's got a pretty solid legacy. I don't think anyone can take that away from him. Yeah, I think B. I think it's fine. All right, next we have Ben Solo, first introduced to us as Kylo Ren. Excellent character. I mean, this is the performance of the sequel trilogy. Adam Driver is fabulous in it. He's a rumbling storm of emotions every time we see him, and that's what makes him so awesome. And I don't know. I feel like the Rise of Skywalker, he's giving it his all, but we don't really have anything more than just a softer version of the Vader that we get in episode 6. But from what we got, I think the performance alone carries some of the weaker elements. I would say A tier.
I was going to say A tier as well. Ben Solo is a really tough one because what's there in the sequels, there's a great story around it. The Rise of Kylo Ren is a really strong mini-series. A lot of the stuff around Ben and Kylo speaks volumes for what they can do with this character. But again, like you said, he's a character that's very incomplete from what we know now. There's so much to learn about Ben Solo that even though Adam Driver gives an incredible performance, even though he is by far the best part of the new cast in the sequel trilogy, I don't know if he's quite in that upper echelon of Star Wars characters yet to be considered an S by any means. Next, we got L3, Lando's robot companion who dies in Solo Star Wars Story. Notoriously, if you watched our channel, I'm not a fan of L3. I don't know if I could quite put her an F, but I would say D.
Though ultimately that is the point, right? She is a little too much at times. And I do like the concepts that she's rallying behind, like droid revolution and independence. Like that has been explored a lot more in canon than it's ever been in Legends. Yeah, I'll say D. Next up, we have L3's former companion, the suave Lando Calrissian. Just I don't think he always gets a lot of like treatment that really services him in Legends. Like he is around a lot, but I don't think anyone really knew how to write Lando. I think what little we've gotten from him in canon, obviously with Billy D returning, but especially Shadow of the Sith, has been a lot more compelling for me. Charles Soule's Lando miniseries is an all-time Star Wars story. I really do love it. I think his relationship with Lobot has never been better. I don't know if I'd want to say S minus per se, because I still think there's a lot more story that needs to be told with Lando. And again, he's always underrated, but he's like a top of A for sure.
I was going to say S minus for Lando. Even though he doesn't have his own story in Legends, he's in almost every single story, so the quantity is there. He's been in a lot of great stuff in canon. Like you said, Charles Soule's miniseries is maybe the most defining Lando story ever. I think he has to be an S minus. Like he's too iconic, too much part of that core of what Star Wars is to take him out. Luke Skywalker himself, since we're including Legends, you also get Grandmaster Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker's my second favorite Star Wars character of all time. I've always been upfront with saying that. Luke has always been my second favorite. It's Obi-Wan, then Luke. Longtime viewers of the channel, that's not going to be a surprise to you at all. So I will absolutely say he's in the S plus in the GOATS tier. For me, I would put him above Anakin because he is my second favorite character.
Luke is really good in Legends, but I think he starts becoming like a deterrent for people as opposed to just being a character at times. You don't have to love who he is in The Last Jedi, but I think after they fill out that 30 years, I think he's going to be a really, really strong character. Next up, we have Luminara Unduli. I don't really have much to say about her. She's Barriss's master. She's a pretty important plot point for the early Rebels. A good foil to Anakin, but also willing to learn from Anakin, which I give her some credit for there. Squarely a B tier character.
I agree. B tier character. She has some great stuff in early Clone Wars. Luminara is shortchanged, but the stuff in Clone Wars 08 is good enough that I would say she's around that Ki-Adi-Mundi, Aayla Secura level of B.
Well, hello there, everybody. It's Liam from the future editing this incredible juggernaut of a video. So here's the deal. We recorded a 5.5 hour raw footage version of this tier list. Normally our tier lists are about an hour long video, a little less. This one would have been closer to about 3 hours edited. So I have made the executive decision to cut this into a part 1 and 2 for sure, probably getting a part 3 as well. Hopefully you all enjoyed this part 1. Thank you so much for watching again. Like the video, comment for more, and subscribe so you get to see the next 2 parts when they come out. But again, yes, this will be part 1 of probably 3. Not going to guarantee anything. I'll have to see what the rest of the edit looks like. But as of now, it is looking like 3 parts. Hopefully you enjoy all 3 of them and enjoyed this episode. Thank you all again so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.